My name is Leanna, and at 34, I never expected to bring a multi-million-dollar tech company to its knees. As lead engineer on our $170 million cybersecurity project, I had earned respect until our new VP decided I was disposable. When Richard announced to everyone, "The team stays, you go," I simply nodded. What he never anticipated was the loyalty my 13 engineers had built. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how one text message made a power-hungry executive call for legal help. My journey to becoming lead engineer wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. I started as a junior developer at TechShield 8 years ago, working 60-hour weeks and surviving on cheap coffee and determination. Back then, I was just grateful to have my foot in the door of a respectable tech company after graduating with my computer science degree. The industry wasn't exactly welcoming to women, especially women who looked like me and spoke their mind. Over those years, I clawed my way up from writing basic code to leading small projects, then medium ones, until finally 2 years ago I was tapped to lead what would become our flagship security software platform, codenamed Phoenix. With a budget of $170 million, this was no small endeavor. The software was designed to protect enterprise clients against sophisticated cyber attacks, something that had become increasingly critical as major corporations faced devastating breaches. My team grew organically as I carefully selected 13 engineers who not only had exceptional technical skills but also complemented each other. Jessica was our algorithm specialist, capable of optimizing code that others had given up on. Marcus handled our user interface design with an artistic touch that made complex security features accessible to everyday users. Rachel was our database architect, ensuring our platform could scale to handle millions of simultaneous connections without compromising speed. Ian specialized in penetration testing, constantly trying to break our own security to strengthen it. And Daniel, our newest member, but possibly the most brilliant, focused on artificial intelligence components that could predict and prevent attacks before they happened. We became more than colleagues. We were a family. We celebrated birthdays with cake in the conference room, supported each other through personal crises, and even took a team hiking trip to Yosemite where Daniel nearly fell off a cliff trying to get the perfect photo. That trip bonded us in ways I couldn't have imagined. When Marcus's mother was diagnosed with cancer, we all pitched in to cover his work so he could take time off without feeling pressured. When Jessica went through her divorce, our Friday coding sessions often turned into impromptu therapy sessions with pizza and occasional tears. Everything changed 6 months ago when our longtime VP of Engineering, Barbara, announced her retirement. Barbara had been my mentor and shield against corporate politics. She understood that engineers needed space and trust to create innovative solutions, not micromanagement and arbitrary deadlines. The company conducted what they called an extensive search for her replacement, which apparently meant finding someone with an impressive resume who would work for less than Barbara's salary. Enter Richard Thompson, our new VP, with his tailored suits and Stanford MBA. From day one, something felt off about him. During his introduction meeting, he spent 45 minutes talking about his previous achievements at competitors but asked 0 questions about our current projects. When I tried to brief him on Phoenix's progress and challenges, he checked his phone repeatedly and then interrupted to ask if we could streamline this conversation. The first red flag appeared during a presentation to potential investors. I had spent weeks preparing detailed technical specifications and roadmaps, but 10 minutes before the meeting, Richard asked for my slides just to review them quickly. When we entered the boardroom, I was shocked to see Richard presenting my work as his own, with my name removed from every slide. When questioned about technical details by an investor, he smoothly redirected the question to me as his technical support staff. The tension escalated when Richard began pushing to add his former colleague Gregory to our team as a technical advisor, despite the fact that Gregory had no experience in cybersecurity. When I expressed concerns about bringing someone up to speed on such a complex project, Richard accused me of being territorially defensive. I might have dismissed these as the typical adjustments to new management, but then I overheard a conversation between Richard and the HR director that confirmed my suspicions. Standing just outside the break room, I heard Richard say, "We need to restructure the Phoenix team. Leanna is too entrenched with her people. I need someone more aligned with my vision leading the project. Once Gregory is settled in, we can transition her to another role or package her out." My blood ran cold. Package her out was corporate speak for forcing someone to resign or firing them. The project I had built from the ground up, the team I had carefully assembled and nurtured all of it, was at risk because a new VP wanted to install his friend in my position. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling fan, making slow circles, considering my options. I could confront Richard directly, but that would likely accelerate his plans. I could go to the CEO, but Richard had clearly been cultivating that relationship since his arrival. I could look for another job, but the thought of abandoning my team and my project felt like surrendering to injustice. By morning, I had made a decision. I would document everything, prepare for the worst, and fight to protect what we had built. What I didn't realize then was that Richard had already set his plan in motion, and the conflict was about to escalate beyond anything I had imagined. The atmosphere in the office grew increasingly tense over the next few weeks. Richard scheduled a project review meeting where he questioned virtually every technical decision our team had made. When I explained our choice of encryption protocols backed by months of testing and industry best practices, Richard dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "This approach is outdated," he declared, despite having no background in cryptography. "We need to pivot to something more cutting edge." When I asked what specifically he recommended, he vaguely mentioned a technique I knew had been proven vulnerable just months earlier. I cited the research showing its weaknesses, and Richard's face flushed red. "I'm not here to debate technical minutiae," he snapped. "I'm here to provide strategic direction." Jessica caught my eye across the table, her expression a mixture of shock and indignation. After the meeting, my team gathered in our development lab, confused and concerned. "What was that about?" Marcus asked, running a hand through his curly hair. "Does he even understand what we're building?" "He wants to put his stamp on the project," I explained, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "New executives often do this. We just need to keep providing solid technical reasoning for our choices." But Richard wasn't interested in reasoning. The following week, he bypassed me entirely, sending directives directly to team members, creating confusion about priorities and technical approaches. When Daniel came to me concerned about contradictory instructions, I knew I needed to address this head-on. I scheduled a meeting with Richard, preparing a detailed presentation of our progress milestones and the rationale behind our technical architecture. I practiced my delivery, determined to remain professional despite my growing frustration. Richard arrived 15 minutes late to our meeting, immediately pulling out his phone and placing it on the table. "Make it quick, Leanna. I have a call with the board in 30 minutes. I walked through our progress, methodically emphasizing how we were ahead of schedule on key deliverables. When I reached the section on our technical architecture, Richard interrupted. "I've been reviewing this with Gregory," he said, referring to his friend who still hadn't officially joined the company. "We think your approach is unnecessarily complex. It's creating too many dependencies." "The dependencies are intentional," I explained. "They're security layers. Removing them would create vulnerabilities." Richard leaned back in his chair. "Listen, Leanna, I understand you've been running this your way for a while, but the market is changing. We need agility, not excessive caution." "Our clients are financial institutions and healthcare providers," I countered. "Their priority is security, not releasing features quickly." The conversation devolved from there. It became clear that Richard wasn't interested in understanding our approach. He had already decided to reshape the project regardless of the technical consequences. After that meeting, I approached Catherine, our director of technology, hoping to find an ally. Catherine had always been supportive of our team, recognizing the technical excellence we delivered. We met for coffee away from the office, and I carefully outlined my concerns. "I know Richard is new," I said, "but the changes he's pushing could compromise the entire project. We're building security software. We can't cut corners." Catherine sighed, stirring her latte absently. "Leanna, I understand your concerns, and technically I agree with you. But Richard has the board's ear right now. They see him as a visionary who can accelerate our growth." "Even if that growth comes at the expense of product integrity?" I asked. "I'll try to run interference where I can," Catherine promised. "But be careful about being labeled as resistant to change. That's career suicide in this industry." Richard's next move was more direct. He began excluding me from key meetings with clients and stakeholders. I only discovered a major requirements change when Rachel mentioned it casually, assuming I already knew. When I confronted Richard about being left out of the loop, he smiled thinly. "I thought you preferred to focus on the technical details rather than client management," he said smoothly. "I'm just trying to respect your strengths." Meanwhile, I began hearing rumors that Richard was telling other departments I was technically brilliant but difficult to work with and resistant to innovation. The narrative was being carefully constructed to justify whatever action he planned to take. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every decision Richard made that contradicted best practices or client requirements. I asked team members to email me summaries of conversations they had with Richard, creating a paper trail. I knew I might need ammunition, though I still hoped the situation could be resolved professionally. The breaking point came during a quarterly review with our largest client, First National Bank. Their chief information security officer asked specific questions about how our solution would protect against a new class of attacks that had recently compromised one of their competitors. I began explaining our approach when Richard cut me off. "What Leanna is trying to say," he interjected, "is that we're considering multiple approaches to this challenge. Nothing has been finalized." The client frowned. We were under the impression that this capability was already in development as outlined in the specifications. Before I could respond, Richard jumped in again. "Absolutely, and at Island, I just meant that we're enhancing the original approach based on new intelligence." He gave me a warning glance. After the meeting, I confronted him. "You contradicted me in front of the client. We do have a solution for those attacks, and it's already implemented in the latest build." "Your solution is untested," Richard retorted. "I'm not going to let you make promises we can't keep." "It's not untested," I insisted. "We've run thousands of simulations." Richard's expression hardened. "This is exactly the problem, Leanna. You make unilateral decisions without considering the broader business implications. This isn't your personal project." I took a deep breath. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and the executive team to review the technical direction of Phoenix. There seem to be fundamental misunderstandings about our approach." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That won't be necessary. In fact, I've already discussed restructuring the Phoenix team with leadership. We'll be making some announcements soon." My stomach dropped. I made one last attempt, requesting a meeting with the chief technology officer, but was told he was too busy preparing for the quarterly board meeting. The walls were closing in. Later that week, Richard called a team meeting without me. Daniel texted me immediately. "Richard is telling us about a new technical leadership structure for Phoenix. You need to hear this." I rushed to the conference room, entering as Richard was explaining how Gregory would be joining as technical director, overseeing all engineering decisions. The team sat stone-faced, looking uncomfortable. "Ah, Leanna," Richard said when he noticed me. "I was just bringing the team up to speed on our new structure." "What you didn't discuss with me, the current technical lead," I pointed out. "This decision comes from above my pay grade," Richard said with false sympathy. "The board wants to accelerate development." Looking at my team's faces, I saw anger, confusion, and concern. They knew, as I did, that this wasn't about acceleration. It was about control, about Richard placing his people in key positions. And it was clear that I was being systematically pushed out. What Richard didn't understand was the loyalty this team had built. As I looked at Jessica, Marcus, Rachel, Ian, and Daniel, I knew they wouldn't accept this situation quietly. What none of us realized was how quickly things would come to a head and how dramatically it would all unfold. That evening, I invited the core team members to my apartment. I ordered pizza and made sure there was plenty of beer and wine. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation, and I wanted everyone to feel comfortable. One by one, they arrived, expressions somber as they settled into my living room. "I'm guessing this isn't just a social gathering," Jessica said, accepting a glass of wine. "Not exactly," I admitted. "But before we dive in, I want to be clear that anything discussed tonight is entirely optional for all of you. Your careers come first." Marcus leaned forward. "Leanna, we all know what's happening. Richard is pushing you out and bringing in his crony to take over Phoenix." "And we're not okay with it," Rachel added firmly. I took a deep breath. I've been preparing for this possibility for weeks now. Richard made his intentions clear pretty early on. I retrieved my laptop and opened a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were meticulously organized documents, screenshots, and recordings of meetings where Richard had made technically unsound decisions or contradicted client requirements. I've documented everything I explained. Every instance where Richard overrode critical security measures, every time he misrepresented our capabilities to clients, every occasion he took credit for our work. The team looked through the evidence, expressions growing increasingly troubled. He told Western Healthcare their data would be encrypted at rest, using their requested protocol, Ian noted, reading from one document. But then he directed me to use a different method because it was more efficient. That's a contract violation. Daniel whistled low. And this email where he told the board we had completed penetration testing when we had explicitly told him it wasn't ready yet. I've been keeping records too, Jessica admitted, pulling out her phone. I started when he tried to get me to change the authentication algorithm without documenting the change. One by one, each team member shared similar stories. Together, we had compiled an extensive record of questionable decisions and ethical breaches. So what's the plan? Marcus asked. Take this to HR. The board. I shook my head. Richard has been cultivating relationships with leadership since day one, and HR works for the company, not for us. I tried going up the chain, but no one wants to hear it. So we're screwed, Rachel asked. Not exactly, I said, pulling out another folder. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Linda Chen at SecureTech. SecureTech was one of our main competitors, known for their innovative approach and strong engineering culture. They had tried to recruit me several times over the years. Linda offered me a position heading up their new enterprise security division, I continued. When I mentioned I wouldn't leave my team, she said, and I quote, "Bring them. All of them. We've been trying to build a team like yours for years." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You're talking about all of us leaving together, Daniel said slowly. I nodded. It's an option. Linda has authorized me to make offers to each of you with signing bonuses and salary increases. But I want to be crystal clear, this is a personal decision for each of you. There's risk involved. What kind of risk? Ian asked. Career risk, reputation risk, I explained. Some might see it as unprofessional to leave en masse. And there's the practical matter of the Phoenix Project. We've all poured our hearts into it. We spent hours discussing the possibilities, the implications, the risks and rewards. By midnight, we had reached a consensus. If Richard followed through with his plan to demote or remove me, we would all submit our resignations simultaneously and accept SecureTech's offer. Over the next week, I discreetly arranged interviews for each team member with SecureTech. Linda was impressed with everyone she met, and as promised, extended competitive offers to each person. We all signed the offers but held off on submitting resignations, waiting to see how the situation with Richard would play out. I also took one additional step. I compiled all our documentation of Richard's mismanagement and ethical lapses into a comprehensive report. If Richard forced my hand, this would go directly to the board of directors and the legal department. During this time, Richard continued his campaign. Gregory started shadowing our team meetings, asking basic questions that revealed his lack of experience in our domain. Richard announced a technical review committee that would need to approve all engineering decisions, effectively removing my authority. The writing was on the wall. Our strategy wasn't just about leaving, though. We created detailed documentation of all our systems and processes, ensuring that if we did leave, we wouldn't be burning bridges completely. We weren't looking to sabotage the company. We just refused to be victims of poor leadership. We also discussed how to handle the transition professionally. If we left, we would offer a reasonable notice period and even limited consultation to help transition the project. Our issue was with Richard, not with the company as a whole. What if Richard backs down? Rachel asked during one of our planning sessions. What if he realizes he can't replace us all and changes course? Then we reassess, I said. This isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for ourselves and for what we've built. As these preparations continued, Richard seemed oblivious to the undercurrents. Perhaps he couldn't imagine that an entire team would choose loyalty over stability. Perhaps he thought engineers were interchangeable resources. Either way, he was about to learn a valuable lesson. The night before everything came to a head, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, questioning my decisions. Was I being prideful? Was I putting my team at risk for my own ego? By morning, I had my answer. This wasn't about pride. It was about integrity. About doing what was right, even when it was difficult. With that clarity, I went to work knowing that one way or another, everything was about to change. The morning of what would become known in company lore as the Phoenix Exodus began like any other. I arrived at the office early, as was my habit, and found the usual pre-work calm. The cleaning crew was just finishing up, the scent of lemon cleaner still hanging in the air. I nodded to Janice, who had been vacuuming the same carpets for as long as I had worked there. "Big day today?" she asked, as she always did. "Could be," I replied with no idea how prophetic those words would prove. I settled at my desk and reviewed the documentation I had prepared one last time. Everything was in order. Each member of my team had a letter of resignation saved as a draft email ready to send with a single click. SecureTech had contracts prepared for all of us. The comprehensive report on Richard's mismanagement was saved on a secure cloud drive accessible from my phone. At 9:15, an unexpected company-wide email arrived. "All staff, please gather in the main conference room at 9:30 for an important announcement regarding the Phoenix project. Attendance is mandatory. Richard Thompson, VP of Engineering." My phone immediately lit up with messages from my team. "Is this it?" texted Jessica. "Looks like the restructuring announcement," I replied. "Remember, no one needs to do anything they're not comfortable with." The next 15 minutes passed in a blur. Team members stopped by my desk ostensibly to discuss technical matters, but really to exchange meaningful glances and quiet words of support. By 9:25, a stream of employees was heading toward the conference room. I deliberately waited until the last minute, not wanting to give Richard the satisfaction of seeing me anxiously waiting. The main conference room was packed when I arrived. All 70 employees from engineering plus representatives from marketing, sales, and executive leadership were squeezed in. Richard stood at the front, Gregory by his side, both wearing crisp button-up shirts and identical smug expressions. Catherine, the director of technology, sat nearby, her face carefully neutral. I spotted my team scattered throughout the room by design rather than coincidence. We had agreed not to cluster together to avoid raising suspicions. Richard cleared his throat as I slipped into a seat near the back. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I have exciting news about the Phoenix project that will shape the future of our company." He launched into a presentation about accelerating innovation and streamlining leadership structures, corporate speak, that everyone recognized as the preamble to organizational changes. Slides flashed by showing a new organizational chart with Gregory prominently featured as technical director, while my position was notably absent. As part of these changes, Richard continued his gaze, finding me in the crowd. "Will be implementing a new technical governance model. Gregory Wilson will be joining us from Next Gen Systems to oversee this transition and lead the technical direction of Phoenix moving forward." The room remained silent. Richard seemed to expect applause but received only uncomfortable stares. Additionally, he pressed on, "We'll be realigning some of our current team members to better utilize their skills. Leanna, would you stand up, please?" My heart pounded, but I kept my face impassive as I rose to my feet. "Leanna has been with us for many years and has made valuable contributions," Richard said with artificial warmth. "Moving forward, we've decided that her talents would be better applied in a technical advisory role on other projects." Murmurs rippled through the room. Everyone understood what was happening. I was being demoted and removed from the project I had built. I believe, Richard continued, looking directly at me, that this change will benefit everyone and allow Phoenix to reach its full potential. "The team stays, you go, Leanna. This decision is final." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. For a moment, I considered all the things I could say, all the accusations I could hurl. But instead, I simply nodded, once my face betraying nothing. "Thank you for the clarification, Richard," I said calmly. "May I be excused to collect my things?" Richard seemed taken aback by my composed response. He had clearly expected resistance, perhaps even hoped for an emotional outburst that would validate his narrative about me being difficult. "Yes, of course," he said, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "HR will be in touch about transition details." With dignity, I walked out of the conference room. As I passed through the door, I heard chairs scraping behind me. Looking back, I saw Jessica stand up, then Marcus, then Rachel. One by one, all 13 members of my engineering team rose from their seats and began following me out. Richard's voice rose in confusion. Where are you all going? The meeting isn't over. No one responded. Silently, my team filed out behind me, faces resolute. As we walked through the open office area, other engineers watched wide-eyed. I led the procession to our development lab, where we had spent countless hours building Phoenix. Without speaking, each person began gathering their personal belongings. Through the glass walls, I could see Richard hurrying from the conference room, his face flushed with anger. He burst into the lab, Gregory trailing behind him. What is this? Some kind of protest, Richard demanded. This is completely unprofessional. I turned to face him. We're simply collecting our things, Richard. All of you get back to the meeting right now, or there will be consequences, he threatened, looking at my team members. Jessica stepped forward. Actually, Richard, we're exercising our right to resign effective immediately. Richard's face contorted in disbelief before settling into a dismissive smirk. Don't be ridiculous. You're not all quitting because Leanna got reassigned. That's career suicide. It's not just about Leanna's reassignment, Daniel said quietly. It's about your technical decisions that compromise security, your misrepresentations to clients, and your disregard for engineering best practices. Richard laughed, though the sound held no humor. Go ahead then. Walk out. There are plenty of engineers who would kill for these positions. Phoenix will continue without you. As we gathered our belongings and prepared to leave, Richard pulled out his phone and began making calls, presumably to HR and other executives. He paced the hallway outside, gesticulating angrily occasionally, glancing at us with a mixture of disbelief and derision. When we were ready, we walked together to the exit. Other employees watched in stunned silence as our group passed. At the security desk, we turned in our badges one by one. Richard followed us, still on his phone, still wearing that smug smile that suggested he thought we would regret our decision. You'll never work in this industry again, he called after us, as we pushed through the revolving doors into the bright morning sunlight. This kind of stunt gets remembered. As the doors closed behind us, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever came next, we had stood up for ourselves and for our principles. As we gathered in the plaza outside the building, I nodded to Jessica, who pulled out her phone and sent a pre-composed text. It's done, she said simply. Back inside, through the glass doors, we could see Richard still standing in the lobby, now laughing, as he spoke to someone on his phone, probably telling them how ridiculous we were being. Then his phone screen lit up with a notification. He glanced down at it, still smiling. And then everything changed. The moment Richard read, that text message would be forever etched in my memory. Standing outside on the plaza with my team, I watched through the glass doors as his expression transformed. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally something I had never seen on his face before, fear. The text sent simultaneously to Richard and several members of the executive team was from Linda Chen, CEO of SecureTech. Richard, I wanted to personally inform you that as of this morning, SecureTech has hired Leanna and all 13 members of the Phoenix engineering team. We look forward to bringing their cybersecurity expertise to our enterprise clients. Best regards, Linda Chen, CEO, SecureTech. Through the glass, we watched as Richard's face drained of color. His phone nearly slipped from his fingers as he frantically began typing a response. He turned to Catherine, who had just emerged from the elevator, and thrust his phone at her. She read the message, her eyes widening, and immediately said something that, even without hearing it, I could clearly read on her lips. Call legal. Now. What Richard and the company were just beginning to realize was the full magnitude of what had happened. It wasn't just that they had lost a team of engineers. They had lost the entire brain trust behind a $170 million project, and those engineers had just joined their direct competitor. As we stood there, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Leanna speaking, I answered. Miss Thompson, this is Michael Reeves, Chief Information Security Officer at First National Bank. First National was our largest client, with a $50 million contract for the Phoenix system. I've just received a rather concerning call from Richard Thompson informing me that there have been some personnel changes on the Phoenix project. That's correct, Mr. Reeves, I confirmed. As of this morning, the entire Phoenix engineering team, including myself, is no longer with the company. There was a long pause. The entire team? All 13 engineers? Yes, sir. Another pause. And may I ask where you've all gone? We've accepted positions with Secure Tech, I said simply. I see. His tone shifted from concern to something more calculated. In that case, I believe we need to have a conversation about our contract. We selected your company specifically because of your team's expertise. This represents a material change to our agreement. I understand, Mr. Reeves. I'm sure SecureTech's CEO would be happy to discuss this with you. Please have her contact me at her earliest convenience, he said before hanging up. I turned to my team who had been watching me intently. That was First National. They're reconsidering their contract. Marcus whistled low. That's $50 million walking out the door. What none of us had anticipated was how quickly the news would spread. Within hours, industry blogs and tech news sites had picked up the story. Headlines like Mass Exodus, Entire Engineering Team Leaves TechShield for Competitor and Security Software Showdown, SecureTech Poaches. Phoenix team began circulating. By afternoon, 3 more clients had contacted me directly, having found my personal email or phone number. All expressed the same concern. They had contracted with TechShield because of our team's reputation and expertise. With us gone, they were questioning their investment. Meanwhile, Richard was in full panic mode. He called my personal phone 7 times before I finally answered. This is completely unethical, he shouted without preamble. You've stolen proprietary information and poached an entire department. Our lawyers will bury you in SecureTech. Richard, I replied calmly. Every member of the team made an individual decision to resign, which is their right. We've taken no proprietary code or documentation. Everything we know is in our heads, and that knowledge belongs to us. You planned this, he accused. This was coordinated corporate sabotage. It was a response to poor leadership and unethical business practices, I corrected him. Speaking of which, I should mention that we've documented numerous instances where you misrepresented capabilities to clients, overrode security protocols without proper testing, and took credit for work you didn't do. Richard fell silent. Those documents have been securely stored. I continued. And copies will be sent to the board of directors if you pursue any legal action against us personally. We have no desire for conflict, Richard. We simply want to move forward in our careers without interference. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Would you like me to email you the table of contents I offered? It includes the meeting where you told Western Healthcare their data would be encrypted using their required protocol, then directed the team to use a different method. Or perhaps the email where you claimed penetration testing was complete when it hadn't even started. There was a long silence. What do you want, he finally asked, his voice subdued. Nothing from you, Richard. Just the freedom to do our jobs at our new company without harassment. In return, we won't actively reach out to TechShield clients or publicly discuss our reasons for leaving. After hanging up, I turned to find my team watching me with expressions ranging from awe to anxiety. Did we just blackmail him? Ian asked nervously. I shook my head. We established boundaries and consequences. There's a difference. The real bombshell dropped an hour later when Linda called me into her office at SecureTech, where we had been setting up our new workspaces. Her assistant had been fielding calls all day from TechShield clients looking to speak with us. First National Bank just called, Linda said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. They want to terminate their contract with TechShield and transfer it to us, assuming we can provide the same security solution your team was building. That's a $50 million contract, I said, stating the obvious. And they're not the only ones, Linda continued. Western Healthcare and Global Finance have both requested meetings. Together that's over $100 million in contracts, potentially moving from TechShield to us. The enormity of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just about our team anymore. We had inadvertently triggered a major shift in the competitive landscape of the cybersecurity industry. By the end of that day, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking: TechShield shares plummet 22% following engineering team departure. The article mentioned that Richard Thompson had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. As I shared this news with my team gathered in our new conference room at SecureTech, there was no celebration. Instead, a somber realization settled over us about the power we had wielded and the responsibility that came with it. We never intended to cause this much disruption, Rachel said quietly. No, we didn't, I agreed. We just wanted to be treated with respect and allowed to do our work with integrity. Jessica raised her water bottle in a toast. To integrity, then, and to new beginnings. As we clinked bottles and coffee mugs, my phone rang once more. The display showed a name that made my heart skip: Elizabeth Carter, CEO of TechShield. I should take this, I said, stepping out of the room. Leanna, Elizabeth's voice was strained but controlled. I think it's time you and I had a conversation about what happened. The confrontation had reached its climax, but the story was far from over. The repercussions would continue to ripple through the industry and our careers for years to come. Our first week at SecureTech passed in a whirlwind of activity. Linda had prepared wonderfully with workstations ready and paperwork streamlined, but the technical onboarding was still intensive. We needed to familiarize ourselves with SecureTech's existing systems and infrastructure while planning how to integrate our expertise into their product lineup. Despite the professional chaos, there was an undeniable energy among our team. Free from Richard's micromanagement, ideas flowed freely. During our first architecture meeting, Daniel proposed a novel approach to threat detection that had been repeatedly shot down by Richard. When Linda enthusiastically approved resources for a prototype, his face lit up with vindication and excitement. It feels strange, Jessica commented during a coffee break, like we've been running uphill for months and suddenly the ground is level. Meanwhile, the tech community was buzzing about our move. LinkedIn posts speculating about the mass resignation garnered thousands of comments. Industry forums debated the ethics and implications. A popular cybersecurity podcast even dedicated an entire episode to analyzing what they called the Phoenix incident. Most coverage was surprisingly supportive. As details emerged about Richard's management style and technical decisions, many professionals shared similar experiences with misguided leadership. Our action was being characterized as a stand for engineering integrity rather than corporate disloyalty. Not all press was positive, of course. Some commentators labeled us unprofessional, arguing that coordinated departures violated unwritten rules of business conduct. A few particularly harsh critics suggested we should be blacklisted from sensitive projects, painting us as security risks. Through it all, we maintained public silence following our agreement not to discuss our reasons for leaving. This professional restraint seemed to frustrate Richard, who had apparently expected us to badmouth TechShield publicly, giving him ammunition for potential litigation. On our fifth day at SecureTech, the first client meeting was scheduled. First National Bank CISO Michael Reeves arrived with his technical team to discuss transferring their security contract. I want to be clear, Michael began once pleasantries were exchanged. Our decision isn't made lightly. We've invested considerable resources in the Phoenix implementation at TechShield. We understand completely, Linda assured him. We're prepared to make this transition as seamless as possible. Michael turned to me. Leanna, I have one fundamental question. Can your team recreate what you were building at TechShield without violating any intellectual property constraints? It was the question everyone had been dancing around. I answered carefully, but confidently. What we created at TechShield was built on our expertise and experience, which we carry with us. The specific code implementation belongs to them, but the architectural approaches, security methodologies, and technical strategies come from our knowledge base. We can absolutely build a system that meets or exceeds your security requirements without replicating proprietary code. Michael nodded, satisfied. That's what I needed to hear. We've reviewed our contract with TechShield and identified a material breach clause we can exercise given the complete departure of the specified development team. By the end of the meeting, we had outlined a transition plan for First National's security infrastructure. When Michael left, he was already making calls to initiate the contract termination with TechShield. 3 more client meetings followed that week, each ending with similar results. By Friday, over $80 million in contracts were in various stages of migration from TechShield to SecureTech. The financial impact on TechShield became impossible to ignore. Their stock had dropped 30% in 5 trading days. Industry analysts were questioning the company's ability to deliver on existing contracts without the Phoenix team. Rumors of emergency board meetings circulated. On Saturday morning, I received a call from Catherine, the technology director, who had worked alongside Richard. It's total chaos here, she said without preamble. Richard has been suspended pending investigation. The board brought in a crisis management team. Gregory disappeared the moment things got tough. I'm sorry it's affecting you, I said genuinely. Catherine had always tried to shield our team when possible. Don't be. This needed to happen, she sighed. They're going through Richard's emails and communications. Leanna, some of what they're finding goes beyond bad management. He apparently made agreements with his previous colleagues to bring them in at inflated salaries while taking kickbacks. This was worse than I had suspected. That explains his determination to replace me with Gregory. It does, Catherine confirmed. But it gets worse. He's been selectively sharing our intellectual property with former associates, possibly setting up some kind of side venture. Legal is having a field day. The news left me stunned. Richard's behavior hadn't just been arrogant and unprofessional, it had potentially been criminal. What happens now? I asked. The board has called an emergency session for Monday. Elizabeth wants you to call her before then. I think. Catherine hesitated. I think they're going to offer you a deal to come back and salvage what's left of Phoenix. After ending the call, I sat on my balcony watching the city below and contemplating how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, I had been fighting to preserve my role on a project I loved. Now companies were competing for our services, and the person who had tried to push me out was facing potential legal consequences. The following day brought news that shook the industry even further. TechShield announced they were conducting an internal investigation into potential ethical breaches and misappropriation of company resources by a senior executive. Though Richard wasn't named specifically, everyone knew who they meant. By Monday morning, the fallout had escalated. 2 additional clients had suspended their contracts with TechShield pending the outcome of the investigation. The company's stock had been temporarily halted from trading due to volatility. As promised, CEO Elizabeth Carter called me directly. Leanna, I'll be blunt, she began. We made a terrible mistake allowing Richard to push you out. The board was misled about his qualifications and his plans for Phoenix. I tried to raise concerns, I reminded her. I know that now, she acknowledged. We found your emails to the CTO and others. They were never escalated to me, which is another issue we're addressing. Elizabeth took a deep breath. I'd like to make you an offer to return as VP of Engineering with full control over Phoenix and a substantial compensation increase. We need you and your team back if we're going to survive this. The offer was stunning in its directness. A week ago, it would have been everything I wanted. Now I wasn't so sure. I appreciate the offer, Elizabeth, but we've signed contracts with SecureTech. More importantly, we've been treated with respect and given the autonomy we need to do our best work here. I understand that. But this is an existential crisis for TechShield, she pressed. We're prepared to make it worth your while. Name your price. I considered my response carefully. This was never about money, Elizabeth. It was about creating an environment where technical excellence and integrity are valued. Richard systematically undermined both. Richard is gone, she emphasized. We're cleaning house. This is your chance to build the culture you want. Let me think about it, I said, not wanting to give a firm answer in the heat of the moment. And I'll need to discuss it with my team. We made this decision together, and I won't reverse it unilaterally. After hanging up, I sat with the weight of the decision. TechShield, a company I had helped build for 8 years, was facing possible collapse because of our departure. Yet SecureTech had taken a chance on us, offering refuge when we needed it. There were no simple answers, no clearly right path forward. As Tuesday dawned, breaking news alerts lit up my phone. Richard Thompson had been terminated for cause, with TechShield filing a civil suit against him for breach of fiduciary duty. More damningly, there were rumors that criminal charges might follow related to the kickback scheme Catherine had mentioned. The man who had so confidently told me the team stays you go just 1 week earlier had lost everything: his position, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. There was no satisfaction in this knowledge, only a somber recognition of how quickly fortunes could change when built on shaky ethical foundations. By week's end, I had made my decision. After consulting with each team member individually and collectively, I called Elizabeth back with our answer. The consequences of that choice would shape not just our careers, but the future of both companies and perhaps the industry itself. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, but we've decided to decline your offer. The words hung in the air for a moment before TechShield's CEO responded. May I ask why we're offering everything you asked for before this happened? Complete autonomy executive level compensation board representation. Because some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, I explained. The trust was broken not just by Richard but by a system that allowed him to operate unchecked. My team has found a home at SecureTech, where our expertise is valued from day one, not only after a crisis proves its worth. Elizabeth sighed deeply. I understand. For what it's worth, I believe TechShield will learn from this failure. Sometimes organizations need a catastrophic event to recognize fundamental flaws in their culture. I hope that's true, I said sincerely. The industry needs strong ethical companies focused on genuine security, not just profit margins. We parted amicably, with Elizabeth wishing us success, and me hoping that TechShield would indeed recover and rebuild in a healthier way. In the months that followed, our team thrived at SecureTech. We developed a new enterprise security platform codenamed Firebird that incorporated the best ideas from Phoenix while pushing the boundaries further than we'd been allowed before. Clients who had followed us from TechShield reported higher satisfaction, and new clients sought us out based on our growing reputation. TechShield survived, though, in a diminished form. They refocused on smaller-scale security applications and eventually found a new niche. The Phoenix project was officially canceled, with existing client contracts renegotiated to provide alternative solutions. Their stock recovered somewhat, though it never returned to previous heights. As for Richard, the legal consequences proved substantial. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud related to the kickback scheme and received a 3-year sentence, most of which would be probation after 6 months of incarceration. His career in technology leadership was effectively over. Almost exactly 1 year after our departure, I encountered Richard at a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. SecureTech had sent our team to present our new Firebird platform, which had recently won industry recognition for innovation. Richard was there representing a small consulting firm, a significant step down from his previous executive role. We passed each other in the hallway between sessions. For a moment, I thought he might pretend not to see me, but instead he stopped. Congratulations on Firebird, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. The industry is calling it groundbreaking. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I made mistakes, he admitted, looking somewhere past my shoulder rather than meeting my eyes. Costly ones. I nodded, unsure what response he was seeking. Forgiveness seemed premature, but continuing animosity served no purpose. The thing is, he continued, I never really understood what I had with your team. I saw engineers as interchangeable resources rather than a cohesive unit with its own culture and collective intelligence. That was indeed a costly misunderstanding, I agreed. We parted without further conversation, but the encounter stayed with me throughout the conference. Richard had learned his lesson through severe consequences. I wondered how many other executives might benefit from understanding the true value of their technical teams before reaching a similar breaking point. Back at SecureTech, we continued to build not just software but a culture where technical excellence and ethical standards reinforced each other. Linda gave us the freedom to establish our own processes, and we created a collaborative environment where ideas were evaluated on merit rather than who proposed them. Jessica, who had always shown leadership potential, stepped up to manage half our growing team. Marcus spearheaded a mentorship program for junior engineers. Rachel pioneered new database security approaches that became industry standards. Ian and Daniel filed patents for their innovations in threat detection. Each member who had taken the risk to follow me that day had flourished in ways that wouldn't have been possible under Richard's management. The experience taught me several profound lessons that I carry to this day. First, true leadership isn't about titles or control. It's about creating an environment where talented people can do their best work. Richard had the title, but he never understood that his role should have been to remove obstacles, not create them. Second, documentation is not paranoia. It's professional self-preservation. Had we not meticulously recorded Richard's decisions and actions, our departure might have resulted in litigation rather than vindication. Third, individual expertise has value, but collective expertise exponentially more so. What made our team special wasn't just individual talent, but the synergy we had developed through years of collaboration. Richard saw replaceable parts. What he missed was the irreplaceable whole. Fourth, ethical standards aren't negotiable. By compromising security principles for expediency, Richard undermined the very purpose of the product we were building. In cybersecurity, especially integrity isn't just a virtue, it's a business necessity. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that standing up for what's right, even at personal risk, often inspires others to do the same. Had I left alone, it would have been a footnote in corporate history. Because we stood together, we changed the trajectory of companies and careers. Today, 3 years later, SecureTech has doubled in size and become an industry leader in enterprise security. Our original team has expanded to over 50 engineers, maintaining the culture of excellence and integrity we established. I now serve as Chief Technology Officer, helping shape not just our products but our company's ethical direction. The scars from that confrontation with Richard have faded, but the lessons remain vivid. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't a fiery retort, but a simple nod followed by decisive action. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't retribution, but success on your own terms. If you're facing similar challenges in your workplace, remember that your value isn't determined by those who fail to appreciate it. Your knowledge, integrity, and relationships are assets that travel with you. Stand firm in your principles. Document everything and know when it's time to simply nod and walk away towards something better. Have you ever had to stand up to unfair treatment at work? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life workplace experiences. Share this with someone who might need a reminder of their own value and power. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply walking away with your dignity intact.